Hello and welcome back to the Horizon Education training videos. I will be going over the SAT writing portion in this video. And again, just a reminder, to reach the Prezi presentations, please just go to horizoneducation.com, hit login at the very top. And if you've already logged in once, then it should automatically take you to all the Prezi presentations. And I will be going over the SAT writing and language Prezi presentation. And my goal is just to briefly go over the content that's in the Prezis and really just to get you familiar with what you're going to encounter as you present this to the students. And I would like to encourage you to look at these presentations, and if at any point during the video you can pause and take a look at each slide and think about how you may implement the information. So Horizon Test Prep for SAT writing and language. Right? Again, beginning with a warm-up. Right? Independently reading pages 161 to 164 and being able to answer the questions numbers 1 through 5 as a class. We'll always show this slide so that the students can inculcate this into their thought, right? That the 3 sections are the main sections of the SAT, and this section will be related to the writing and language test, right? And again, here's a breakdown of what the writing section looks like. SAT writing and language is 35 minutes long. It is a score from 200 to 800 points with 44 multiple choice and 4 passages that are 400 to 450 words in length. The question types include argument, informative questions, nonfiction questions, and narrative questions. The passage, there's passage focus on careers, history, social studies, humanities, and science. Again, the core elements on the SAT are presented here to the students, and it focuses on what is related to the writing section. So we have analysis in science and social studies, relevant words in context, and command of evidence. Expression of ideas. Right? These sections explain exactly what is included in the writing section, right? So we have expression of ideas, and we have standard English conventions. Under expression of ideas, we have topic development, which includes propositions, support, focus, quantitative information. Right? We have organization, which includes logical sequence, introduction, conclusions, and transitions. Right? And finally, there's rhetorically effective language use, which also includes sentence structure, conventions of usage, conventions of punctuation. Standard English conventions. Right? We have sentence structure, which is related to sentence formation and inappropriate shifts in construction. Conventions of usage, which includes pronouns, possessive determiners, agreement, frequently confused words, logical comparisons, and conventional expressions. And finally, conventions of punctuation, right? And end of sentence punctuation, within sentence punctuation, possessive nouns and pronouns, items in a series, non-restrictive and parenthetical elements, and unnecessary punctuation. All right. Approaching the writing test. Now, and we're presenting strategies specific to the writing portion of the SAT throughout these next few slides. To perform well on the writing test, use different strategies for reading the passages, reading the questions, and answering the questions. All right. So here are some strategies to succeed. Read the whole passage, work on one passage at a time, put your pencil and paper, mark it up, and read passages out of order. So it's suggested that once you start a passage, you read that whole passage and you answer the questions relating to that passage. It is not recommended that students read a passage and then move on to another passage and read that passage and start to mix and match the questions relating to each passage, right? It's better to focus on one passage, answer all the questions that you can on that relating to that passage, right? But, and I'd like to emphasize this as well, you can read passages out of order, right? So if you end up feeling like, and this is from the perspective of the students, if the students are more comfortable reading, let's say, passage number 3 first, then go ahead and read passage number 3, but then answer all the questions relating to that passage and don't bounce around too much. Right, read the whole passage. For the writing test, every sentence is important, even if they don't include underlined portions. Reading the entire passage gives you contextual clues that may help to answer the questions. Don't skip over portions of the passage just because they don't include the questions. Right? For the writing section, it's tempting to just focus on the underlined portions because it's a lot faster. However, there are a lot of clues hidden within the rest of the passage that can help students answer questions correctly. So we always encourage them to read the entire passage. Work on one passage at a time. Attempt to answer all questions for a passage before moving to the next passage. It makes it easier to answer the questions this way. If you are unsure about an answer, circle it in your test booklet and enter a guess on your answer sheet. If there's extra time, go back to the question. Right? So there are situations in which the student will not be able to find an answer right away, and they may want to skip it and then move on to another passage. The only issue with doing that is that by the time that they are reaching the end of the section and they have a little extra time to go back, they might have forgotten what that passage was all about, so they have to read the passage again, right? So it's very inefficient time-wise, right? So we try to encourage them to focus on one passage at a time and try to answer all the questions for that passage when they read the passage. Put pencil on paper. Mark up passages in your test booklet as you read them to keep track of important information that will help you answer questions correctly. Read passages out of order. This is helpful. This is a helpful strategy if you feel rushed. Skim through the first paragraph of each passage. Begin with the passage that seems the most interesting or least difficult. Again, this is referring to whether students look at a passage and feel like it's a bit too complicated and they might skip it to read the next passage, but once they choose a passage, they should stick to that passage and answer all the questions for that passage. Right? Begin with the passage that seems most interesting. However, make sure that you are bubbling in for the correct answers on your answer sheet. Careless errors can be made if you don't double check. Right? Misbubbling is a huge problem with students, so always remind them. Make sure you're bubbling in the correct question, and make sure that you're bubbling in clearly and making those bubbles dark. Okay? Strategies to succeed when reading passages: you will come across underlined portions with question numbers next to them. You may need to revise words, phrases, or whole sentences. There are two basic question types: conventions and expression. And here are the differences between the two. Conventions. These questions are about the basic rules of English. There will be grammar and or punctuation errors in underlined portions. Use process of elimination to knock out options that are incorrect. Expression. These questions are about issues of logic, style, and tone. The underlined portion does not contain errors of English. Do not select no change because the underlined portion is grammatically correct. Instead of using process of elimination, compare choices and select the best option, right? And it shows you your tasks underneath each. To select an option that correctly follows the rules and conventions of standard English for conventions and for expression is to select an option that is the most clear, logical, and appropriate in the context of the passage. Okay, so now here we're going through and trying to get the students to think about, well, what questions are relating to conventions? what questions are relating to expression, right? So here, Labradors are known for being friendly, outgoing, and playful, but they are also known for their tendency to chew objects. How do the answer choices differ from each other? We can look at all the differences between each answer choice. One's using dashes, one's using commas, one doesn't have as many commas. So just figuring out what the differences are in the answer choices gives you clues as well. So what type of question is this? Okay. This question is about punctuating items in a list. Right? All the answer choices have the same words, but the punctuation is changing. Right? So it is a question of conventions. Here's another example. Synthetic fibers are often inequitably criticized as being cheap and inferior. Okay, what type of question is this? How can we select the best answer? So in this example, you have to look at the context and think about what the meaning of the word is and trying to find a better fit, or if not, selecting no change. All answer choices would be grammatically correct. The task is select the most appropriate word in context. So this is a question on expression. To select the best word in context, think about the meaning, tone, and connotations of each word. All words mean in a biased way. However, C makes more sense than B or D does. Do. We could use some of our own strategies. Answering the questions. When choosing an answer, use these strategies. Right? And you can find them on page 174. 1. Use context. 2. Plugging in options. 3. Choosing no change. And 4. Guessing. Right? And there are examples of each strategy. Use context. Use context to answer questions that require information from a whole paragraph. When looking for contextual clues about a sentence, read the sentence that comes before it and the one after it. Context helps answer questions about the author's tone, style of writing, evidence, intention, logical order of events, usage of words and phrases. Context is important. What do the sentences after the underlined portion tell you about the president? As president, he was a garrulous orator. He always struck the right balance between fluid and forceful expression, and his speeches were enjoyable and appropriate. Now, I try to point out to the students, if you were only focusing on the first sentence, it would be much more difficult to figure out what the underlying portion means. Right? As president, he was a garrulous orator. Okay, but reading the next sentence helps clarify what that word means. He always struck the right balance between fluid and forceful expression. Right? It's elaborating on what the previous sentence was talking about. So, is garrulous an appropriate word to describe him given the context? Right? Okay. The second sentence tells us that the president has a fluid and forceful expression and that his speeches are enjoyable. The word garrulous means extremely talkative. Given the context, this is not the right word to describe him because a word that means fluid, forceful, enjoyable, and appropriate should be used. Looking at the answer choices, you can see that C, eloquent, is the best choice. And I try to point out to the students that some words have inherently negative connotations and positive connotations, and you have to think about when you're thinking about context, is the writer trying to convey a positive feeling or a negative feeling when they're trying to use a specific word, right? So, for instance, I wouldn't choose verbose, right? Because verbose has a negative connotation, being very talkative, right? When this passage is saying, well, he struck the right balance, right? He was good at being fluid and forceful, right? And his speeches were enjoyable and appropriate. All of these words describing the president have a positive connotation, so it just doesn't fit to choose an answer choice that has a negative connotation. Plugging in options. Right? Before bubbling in your answer, plug in your answer choice. Reread the sentence, but substitute your answer choice for the underlined portion. Make sure your sentence makes sense. And here are some points to remember. The best version of a sentence or paragraph will correct the errors and avoid any new errors. Always consider options exactly as they are worded. Right? This is important in the writing section because there is a purpose to the way things are written in the writing section of the SAT. Right? So every word counts. And here's an example, right, found on page 175. What type of error does the underlined sentence have? And plug in these options to determine which one is the most correct, or which one is the best answer choice. She set numerous aviation records. She was not able to be located after her plane failed to reach its destination. Right, so this is a way to find out if a student can identify the correct punctuation. Okay, the second sentence is incorrect in the original passage because it connects two independent clauses with a comma. This is a comma splice. To revise a sentence, you can change the underlined portion to a dependent clause. Choice B begins with a dependent clause. When you plug this choice in, what new error does it make? Right? Amelia Earhart was a female aviation pioneer. Having set numerous aviation records, she and her partner was not able. Right? You can see the obvious mistake there. Okay. When plugging in answer choice D, we see there is still an error because it still requires a comma. So C is correct because it makes the appropriate revision, right, without causing new errors. No change. Don't be afraid of choosing no change. Right? While much of the writing test is focused on spotting and correcting errors, some portions of the passages will need no correction. When questions have no change as possible answer, don't be afraid to pick it. Remember to read the underlying portion using context and go through answer choices using process of elimination. After using strategies, if you think the portion is best left unchanged, bubble in A, no change as your answer. No change. And here's an example of just a question that doesn't require any changes. A lot of students make the assumption that most of the questions are going to have errors, and so they're less inclined to choose no change. But try to encourage students to think about the strategies that we taught them and go through the knowledge that they have on punctuation and writing conventions. And if they really don't see anything wrong with it, then go ahead and choose no change. Guessing. There's no penalty for guessing. Always guess if you don't know the correct answer. And I'd like to add in if you run out of time and don't know the correct answer, right? Because there are oftentimes, if you don't know the correct answer and you feel like you're spending too much time on it, you can skip it and reach the end of the section. And if you have extra time, go back, right? And then try to figure it out. But if you absolutely have run out of time and you have empty questions, always fill it in with a guess, right? See if you can eliminate any answer choices and make a better educated guess. Always bubble in guessing on your answer sheet, right? And never leave a question blank. All right, writing and language. So these are questions that are related to different categories in the SAT, and the categories are listed on the left, right? This one is relating to relevant words and context. And these are just some samples, some sample questions that you can go over with the class. SAT writing language, another example related to relevant words and context. Right? Which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlying portion? Command of evidence. This question in the writing section relates to command of evidence and asks the students which choice most effectively establishes the main topic, right? So you have to interpret the reading. Graphs, right? So in the writing section, there will also be graphs, which can be confusing to some students. And this is an example just showing what it looks like. Okay. And here are the answer choice or the answers for each of those examples. Okay. And the reason why they come later is because we're trying to encourage students to think about the questions first, and then later going over the answers with them. So you, as a presenter, if you have looked through the Prezi already, then it shouldn't come as a surprise. But if you have not gone over or through the Prezi and you approach this part of the Prezi presentation, it might induce a little panic because the answers aren't coming right after the questions. But don't worry, the answers come later. Classwork. For SAT and writing language, we have reading the passage on page 171 through 172, and to answer questions 1 through 5A, right? And it's important that we try to get the students to interact with each other, so we encourage them to discuss their answers with a partner. Now, I would encourage instructors to experiment with the different group formations that you can work with in your class. And I say that because sometimes teachers like to pair high-performing students with low-performing students so that they can help teach the lower-performing students. Or maybe teachers will put students in groups based on the type of questions that they're getting wrong so that they can all learn from each other and really bounce ideas off of each other. And it's really up to you how you want to make those formations, and you can spend some time thinking about whether you want to make adjustments like that, and that's really, we leave that up to the instructor. You can also just not do anything experimental and just go straight forward and try to have the class work as a whole instead of breaking them apart into pairs or groups. But this is all just suggestions that we make to instructors to help increase the efficiency for the students. And here is more classwork, right, from page 171 to 173. And again, this is not here so that they can go on and look at the screen and answer the questions based on the screen. All of these are found in their book, so they should all have their book and open up to the appropriate pages. Okay. Of course, the classwork continues. Okay. And lastly, homework, right? For the writing and language section, reading the passage on page 177 to 178 and answering the questions to that passage, right? And the answer key is in the back of the book on page 723, right? And that is it for the SAT writing and language portion. I look forward to meeting you again in the next training video.